This is the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast with your host, Kevin Murray.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. On this episode, we have a guest who has been described by an anonymous source as a guy who has won so many fantasy football championships in their league in a row that some league members considered him to be a fantasy god. The source went on to say, you know that guy who always sits in the front of the class, pays attention to everything the teacher says, is never doodling, and is always a straight A student? Well, he is definitely not that kid. He's the one who sits somewhere in the back writing down his 115th mock draft. True story. Fantasy football is in his blood, and he lives and breathes this stuff. Now, the source concluded by saying, when he is not supporting atrocious teams like the FIU Panthers, the Miami Heat, or the Miami Dolphins, he's off being the nicest guy in the world who will do anything it takes for the people that he loves, except actually make a reasonable dynasty trade where he doesn't completely rip you off. It's my pleasure to welcome the content lead at Football Guys. It's the pretend GM himself, Alfredo Brown. Welcome in, buddy.
Wow, that is a heck of an introduction. I gotta find out who the anonymous source was because they absolutely nailed that 100%. Never paying attention in class, and wow, they got it spot on.
Any guess? Do you have a guess?
I mean, my first guess has gotta be Vig, Dr. Vig.
Yeah. It's Dr. Big, of course.
Of course it is, man. Yeah. What a good guy.
I love it. That was fun. Now, obviously, you're coming off a tough week as a Dolphins fan with your squad losing to Kansas City. What are your thoughts on the 2023 Dolphins at this moment in time?
So I'm going to sound so much like a homer when I say this because there's been all the talk this week. And I like this because right now I get a chance to just be a homer and not be a fantasy analyst for a second. There's been so much talk about how the Dolphins are frauds because they're losing to the good teams, but then beating the bad teams. And it's like, well, yeah, is that what you want from NFL teams? Like you beat the bad teams. The same Bills team is out there losing to bad squads. And I don't know, man, if losing a game to the Chiefs and the Eagles and the Bills makes you a bad team, the NFL is just littered with bad teams. I still have a lot of hope for the Miami Dolphins. As long as Tua stays healthy and the receivers stay healthy, they're getting Devon Achane back. I'm really excited about that in fantasy. I think he's a nice little buy low right now while the Dolphins are on bye. So, yeah, I think that the future's still pretty bright for the Miami Dolphins.
I like it. Now, I'm a Seahawks fan coming off that brutal loss to Baltimore. Yeah, so I'm feeling it probably a little worse than you are right now. Obviously, it's an interesting time in Seattle. So everyone's fired up, but at the same time, that was not something we expected because Seahawks and Pete Carroll, I mean, they typically don't get blown out. Like they're always kind of in game. So that was tough to swallow. So, but you are indeed a Dolphins lifelong fan. I brought Dan Marino in here for you. Take me back to when you fell. Yeah, take me back to when you fell in love with the game of football. Were you a big sports fan growing up?
Yes, I was a big sports fan growing up. I grew up just my mother and I, and she was the one that actually pushed me towards sports. And oddly enough, my first love was baseball. And now you'll never catch me watching a baseball game. But as a kid, that was my first love, was watching the Florida Marlins. They were the new inaugural team. And then it was basketball with the Miami Heat, because all of these franchises were kind of around the same age as me. The Heat were a little bit older. The Marlins were a little bit younger. And it almost felt like I was growing up with them. So when they had their success, I loved it as a kid. And the sad thing is I have a Dan Marino helmet over my shoulder here, but I actually never saw Dan Marino play. I did not become a Dolphins fan until the year 2000 when Jay Fiedler, it was either Jay Fiedler or Damon Heward or one of those guys. It was when the team was not very good anymore. Yeah. And I never got to see them with Dan Marino. And I remember being a kid and being at like Disney World or something with my family and hearing, oh, the Dolphins lost to the Jaguars like 60 something to whatever. And I was just like, why would I want to be a fan of that? And then lo and behold, a couple years later, start watching football. There's the league is happening at my elementary school where all the other kids are doing it. So I was like, okay, I'll go and play. I wasn't very good at first. It got better and just fell in love with the game, fell in love with learning it, fell in love with watching it, playing it. The rest was history.
That's awesome. Now, when I was as little as can be, my first memories of football were from the 85 season. So I remember, the Bears unstoppable. And then Monday Night Football, Dan Marino and the Dolphins, give them their only loss, right? So, but no, Marino was as good as it gets, way ahead of his time. I'm sure you've seen all the footage. Like,
Oh,
his skill set would have been incredible today. Like, he would have been as dominant as anybody. But back then, like, nobody was like Dan Marino. So for people that, question like all-time great talents, I mean, Dan Marino is always right there in my book. So tell me about your degree in sports management and then your experience as a college football scout.
So basically, I got to college and I was kind of like every other kid. I had no idea what I wanted to study, and I thought, okay, maybe I'll do law. I've always been, able to kind of find the finer details of things and present a good argument for stuff. And I decided not to go with that. And then I thought maybe medicine, and I was like, that's way too much studying. There's absolutely no way I'm going to do that. And then I sort of just fell into, okay, well, not a lot of people actually get into a career that has anything to do with their degree. And this was like kind of, I don't want to say it was a boneheaded decision, but it was kind of like, I just looked at it and I was like, sports management, how hard could that be? And I jumped into it, and I actually really fell in love with the industry and learning the ins and outs of how a lot of sports franchises are run and how facilities are run, and all the things that go on behind the scenes that you don't normally hear about. And with that, a lot of the athletes at the school and a lot of the athletic department get involved with the sports management degree. And with that, I was able to make contacts and became an intern with the Florida International University football team. And it started off as just, regular internship of, hey, go and organize the videos, set up cones for practice, things like that. And I had expressed interest that, hey, listen, what I really enjoy, what I'm passionate about is scouting players, and doing player evals. And I've been doing it my whole life. And I mean, obviously it doesn't mean anything just being a kid in your room, but I made that interest known. And they said, okay, well, here's something that's already been done, but why don't you test yourself out? And they gave me a list with roughly 1,000 recruits from throughout the nation. And they were like, write up as many reports as you can. Let's see what you got. And it ended up being that a decent amount of my reports matched up with what they liked. And actually, I always tell this as kind of my claim to fame story. One of the kids that I liked that they hadn't really looked at too much just yet was Jonnu Smith, who ended up becoming tight end, drafted by the Tennessee Titans and making it all the way to the NFL. And so that was always kind of cool to like have that feather in my hat. And so after I did that internship, I got brought on as a grad assistant, got to do that for a year. And then unfortunately with football, when one guy gets let go, the head coach Mario Cristobal at the time was let go, the whole staff was gone. And I decided, man, if that's how it goes, my job depends on one other dude. I'd rather just be able to control my own destiny. And I took a leap elsewhere and found a new career path.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's tricky to get involved in something like that where your fate is in others' hands. When did you first discover fantasy football? When you start playing the game?
So I had heard about it a little bit when I was in high school, and it just didn't really jump into it too much. Like, I was a football player, and I was always like, I'd rather play real football than your fantasy football, whatever. And then when I got to college, it became something where I was in a fraternity, and the guys were doing fantasy football leagues, and I was like, all right, cool, let's do it. And I started to do the fantasy football leagues with friends, and the draft ended up becoming the most fun thing to do every single year. And it became something that we did beyond that. After we all graduated and after we all got older and started having kids and moving away, we decided to establish an annual kind of guys trip for ourselves. Each year, we'd all go out to a cabin, find a cool place, and we'd always kind of do it right before football season. I think it's Labor Day or Memorial Day weekend, whichever one it is. And we would use that as our draft day, like right before the season starts. And that was one of those cool traditions that happened over and over and over. Then when COVID hit, unfortunately, that took a little bit of a hit. And so we've switched to online drafts now. But man, I think the coolest thing about fantasy football wasn't necessarily the game itself, but it's the camaraderie that you get with the people that you're playing it with. And total strangers turn into good friends, and good friends turn into family. Like it's the coolest thing that this happens from a silly game that we play.
Yeah, I mean that's my my passion about this game is just how fun it is to stay connected with people and compete and have fun with friends, family, or whoever you're playing with. So when you first started diving into fantasy content, not making it, but consuming it, who did you follow? Who did you whose content did you consume at the beginning stages of you playing the game?
Oh man, so there's definitely, three easy ones that come off the top of my head. Um, CBS, Fantasy Football Today with Dave Richard, Heath Cummings, Jamie Eisenberg, Adam Azer, those guys. I mean, been around forever, been doing it forever. They are consummate professionals. The Fantasy Footballers was a very fun podcast for me to get into. And you know what? It's interesting because I looked at it and I was like, this can't be any good. It's not one of those big networks that we're used to, right? I just loved it, absolutely loved it. And then as I kept going, the next one that became so easy to learn and it was so bite-sized and so consumable was JJ Zacharyason's Late Round QB podcast.
Yeah.
And it just became so good to have all these different shows, kind of on repeat. I felt like I was learning and being entertained all at the same time. And really that's what fantasy football content is.
Yeah, no, it's true with JJ. It's I think everybody feels that way. It's like people have their favorite podcasts, there's it's a big variety, but everybody has JJ because again, it's so bite-sized, easy to consume. The way he delivers it, it's so easy to make sure that you don't miss those episodes compared to others. So gotta love that. So you said that when it comes to the game that you love that camaraderie, the game experience with friends, and whatnot. Is that your favorite thing? Is that what your favorite things about the fantasy experience?
Oh yeah, I just absolutely love. So I mean, in our league, we have one of our commissioners. Uh, each week, he does kind of a recap where he'll go over everyone's team and make a new power rankings. And it's so funny that every week, if he's running like 5 minutes late, everyone starts to text him like, "Hey, dude, where are the power rankings at, man? Like, what's up? I want to see where I'm at." It's like, you see the standings in your league, you know how to feel about but you want to see your friend talk smack about another team or say something good about your team. And I think that's one of those things that people love about doing those head-to-head matchups is that you're not really playing defense against the other guy, but to say that you won against your friend, it's so much fun. And especially as we get older, man, like I used to be playing football and basketball every weekend, and now I'm 33. I can't do that every weekend. So this is a fun way to keep kind of the competitive juices flowing and still have fun with my friends.
Now, is that the league that Dr. Vig was talking about that you won so many times in a row? Is this the league you're talking about, the home league with the live drafts and whatnot?
Yeah, that's it kind of became a thing where there was actually it kind of became a rule that a couple of the guys in the league were not allowed to trade with me because the trades would get vetoed. And it made me like very anti trade vetoes. It just
Yeah.
absolutely killed that for me. And we would get into the arguments of like, no, it shouldn't be making your team better and making his team worse. That's not how trades should make both teams better. I'm always like, yeah, well, theoretically, that's how it should work. But this is a grown man making the trade he wants to. And I remember the straw that broke the camel's back was I think I had traded Vernon Davis, who at the time was, was pretty solid tight end. Reggie Bush, who I think this was like one of his last maybe productive years. And I had traded them for a rookie wide receiver who had not done anything yet, Odell Beckham Jr., and Le'Veon Bell, who had not quite broken out yet. He was getting a little bit of a role that was building up. Le'Veon Bell and Odell Beckham ended up having incredible years the rest of that season. I won. And I think that was like the third year in a row where it happened, where I won due to a trade that I had made. And everyone was like, you know what? No, we're not trading with you anymore. Like, this is over.
That's a solid deal. Hitting them when they're just about to peak. I think that's one that goes down in history. And I think that's the kind of fun thing about leagues having a history, having stories like that. What's the true story about the 115 mock drafts in class?
So yeah, I have absolutely horrible ADD. Absolutely horrible ADD. Like when I am hosting a podcast, I am, a little behind the scenes action here. I 100% have everything written out for me. I'm very much Ron Burgundy. If someone writes something that's not supposed to be there, I will read it. I've tried to improve upon that. So what happened is like when I would be in school, it would just be so hard for me to focus on what the teacher was talking about. Like, I really don't want to hear about 18th century, whatever, because it's April and the NFL draft is coming up soon. And so I'd be sitting there, writing down NFL mock drafts by hand off of memory of, all 32 teams in order. I would try to remember all the top prospects and have them written down. And that's where I started to fall in love with, the Dolphins were so bad every single year that it just kind of became the season of hope every offseason of like, ooh, draft picks. Okay, we're finally going to be good again. And every year it would happen where we weren't good. And so I think that's where even more so my love of being able to evaluate players, understand the game from a bigger perspective, instead of just kind of like watching and rooting, it became a thing where I was just like, man, I really love this process of seeing who's good, who's not, trying to pick them for your team. And after I kept doing that over and over and over for these mock drafts and realizing, hey, I kind of know what I'm doing, that led into, why don't I do that against my friends with fantasy football? Let's see how that goes. And it just became a ton of fun.
I love it. I love it. Now, so in your home league, do you guys have a last place punishment, or is there a last place punishment that is out there that is one of your favorites that gives you the most laughs or whatnot?
Oh man, I'm a big fan of like the food punishments where someone has to eat something. I'm trying to remember one of the better punishments we had. I think there was one where we went out on the town after our draft that we had, and the loser from the previous year, we all went out in like our dad shirts and jeans and stuff. And then the one of the losers had to go out wearing like, I think it was like a cheerleading outfit or something like that as we went bar to bar. And like that's I'll say this, we were pretty mild with a lot of our punishments. They were never really that big, but yeah, that was the one that that I definitely remember. A lot of the punishments were deals of like, okay, you have to buy a keg for the first place person, and we'll use this as like an excuse for all of us to get together and have a party.
There you go. That's always good. That's always good. Now, do you have preferred settings, formats that you play in fantasy?
So that's changed over the years for me. I for a long time have really enjoyed PPR, and the more and more I've kind of got ingrained into the fantasy industry and seen it, it's made me sort of veer away a little bit from PPR, and I'm kind of going back towards half PPR because I think that's you know when you see like that performance that George Pickens had the other day where he's getting positive points despite having negative yardage. I think that's one of those things where you start to prove that, maybe PPR is not the best way to go. Um, I totally agree 100% with Jake Seeley. Hashtag ban kickers. No kickers, please. I'm done with them. I'm not a big fan of having DSTs every week. I'm actually in a dynasty league with those same friends that love the idea of having DSTs and dynasty and kickers and dynasty. And I'm like, guys, why are we doing this? So yeah, half PPR for me. Um, I could take it or leave it with the super flex option, but half PPR for me. And I usually enjoy 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 2 flex. Let's get as many players on the field as possible, and let's up the ante. Let's get a little crazy.
I love it. Now we're playing in the guillotine league together. That's been fun. It's the first time I've done that. It's incredible. Like I was on the chopping block once, where it's like that Monday night. You're just I mean, you have no idea how it's going to play out. That's been fun. What's your experience been like with guillotine? With guillotine?
I mean, last year I was not good. I think I was out within the first 4 weeks, and then this year, I remember. It's always funny. It's the team that you leave the draft saying like, "Ugh, that wasn't very good," ends up being your best team. Same things happen for me in this guillotine league. It's happened for me in the flex league, where I leave these drafts and I go, that team's probably not that great, and it's doing phenomenal. Like I'm really happy with my team so far in the guillotine league, and man, I don't know. That's going to be kind of cool. If I win that, get some bragging rights over the guys at Football Guys, I'm with that.
Not a bad thing for sure. So when did you start creating fantasy content?
So this actually wasn't my first go around on doing this. I think I want to say I did it about maybe 5 or 6 years ago with a couple of my friends that were in that fantasy football league, and we made a little fantasy football podcast, and I think we did maybe 10 or 12 episodes. And I'm just gonna be honest, it wasn't good. Like it just wasn't good. We weren't doing research. We were, just 3 guys sitting down talking about football and thinking we knew everything. And but you know what? I think that's also kind of the heart of it all too, is just get out there and do it. Because you're never going to know if you're good at making this fantasy content unless you go out there and try. And I had an experience, a background in doing sports radio. So I had a little bit of experience of, how to edit the stuff and, how to talk on the microphone. And I did that. It failed like tremendously. But one of the last things I did was an episode with Dr. Vig. Vignesh Dorswamy, one of my best friends. He was actually my freshman orientation leader at FIU when I went there. And we did one episode where we were talking about players that were injured, and whatever. It was great. I loved it so much that about, I want to say 2 years later, when COVID hit, I was like, "Hey, Vig, do you want to jump on a podcast with me? If it's not good, it's not good. Like, let's not do it, but let's just try it out. Let's have some fun." We did it. We started talking about dynasty football at first because I noticed that, there wasn't a whole lot in the dynasty industry. And I was like, man, I remember listening to JJ Zacharyason's podcast and thinking, I could do that. Tried to do a solo show. That did not go well. And then I did the show with Vig, and everything went really well. It was just so much fun to sit there and talk with a friend. And, we were getting serious about doing the research and trying to find things that were actionable for listeners. And we started to build up a little bit of a rapport with some fans and get an audience and get some good reviews. And all of a sudden, other people started taking note. And then I was asked to go on other people's shows, and it just little by little, it started to grow and snowball. And now here I am over at Football Guys.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when it comes to Football Guys, the brand, the people behind it, it's built such a great legacy and reputation in the industry. Tell me what the experience has been like with Football Guys and with your role as content lead.
Oh man, I would say, I'll first say this: there's no one else in this industry quite like Joe Bryant. I am so lucky to have met him. So thankful that he has trusted me with this brand, and just to be someone who gets to make content for this company is just, it's incredible. It's Football Guys has been around for so long, and I remember getting the newsletters and seeing their name for so long, and to now be a part of that is just, it's incredible. And I think that one of the things that has surprised me the most is that the business, the company doesn't run how I expected. It doesn't run like your typical business. It really is. I know, like, most places say, "Oh, we're a family, we're a family." It really does feel like that. It really does feel like that. We all get together for our, summit, and like, we were all just hanging out in Vegas this past year. Like, it was a great time. There wasn't any business that was talked. It was just us hanging out, watching football. And man, it's been so nice, and to feel so welcomed so early. That's just been great.
And you got the Football Guys fantasy football show there now. That's kind of like you basically took the pretend GM and moved it over there, correct?
Yeah, so I mean, what happened was when I got hired on by Football Guys, I was part-time, and I made the pitch like, "Hey, can I do some 5-minute videos for you guys on YouTube?" That went pretty well, and I was like, "I kind of know a little bit about YouTube SEO stuff. You mind if I help out?" And that started to go well, and then my videos in particular started to do really well, and that got noticed. And so last year, Football Guys had a ton of shows, but two of the shows were the Pretend GM that I pitched to Joe of like, "Hey, Vig and I have this thing. Can we keep doing it?" He said, "Yeah." And then Dave Kluge had the Launchpad, and it kind of sort of happened where Vig would get so busy working at the hospital. He works at Ohio State. And I'd be like, "Hey, Dave, you mind coming on? I really need a co-host." And then he would bring me onto the Launchpad, and we kept going back and forth so much. We're like, this is kind of silly that we're going back and forth on these shows, and there's not actually a show that's just called the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. We should make that happen. And that's kind of where it was born from. It was just the two of us were doing content separately, and we kept going on each other's shows, and we're like, let's just make this happen.
Yeah, such a natural fit. You guys are obviously pretty incredible together. So it's always
Thank you.
good to see that and see the evolution of these shows and how people collaborate, and then great things like this are born. Let's talk about the fantasy football community. Obviously, we've experienced the expo. What's your experience been like with the expo and the people you've met there? Obviously, you've made a lot of great friendships and relationships through events like the expo. Tell me what your thoughts are on that.
Man, I gotta say, if anyone is thinking about whether or not they should go to the Fantasy Football Expo, go. Go. You're not going to regret going. I promise you. If you're a little nervous, bring a friend, right? And the two of you just go. And even if you're not trying to do content, you just want to have fun, listening and talking about fantasy football, do it. It's a ton of fun. I remember the first year I went, I was absolutely terrified of everyone. And I was I'm not naturally a very outgoing person and a very social person. I can fake it as best as I need to, but I was, super introverted. And I got there, and I wasn't sure what to make of it. And all of a sudden I had someone come up to me like, "Pretend GM, right?" And I was like, you know who I am. And we talked, and then they introduced me to another person and then another person, and it just kind of kept going. And I remember the funny thing was the first year seeing Joe Bryant there and seeing him in his cool, football guy's shoes. He always wears the Vans that have like the black guy Joe on them.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing him walk around. I'm like, that guy just dripping swag. He's cool as heck, man. And Vig saying, like, go say hi to him. That's Joe Bryant. Go say hi. He's the one that sends out those emails for years and years and years. It's like, no, I can't do that. I can't just go say hi to him like that. Like, he's busy. Don't worry about it. And ended up doing like a quick hi, and that was it. And I remember being super nervous about meeting anyone that was there that was from the industry. And then out of nowhere, I want to say a few months later, I ended up getting the call that I'm working with him and doing interviews with him. And it's just so interesting to see how quickly things can change for you by putting yourself out there and taking that first step. And I think that's what happens with a lot of us is we just get so scared to take that first step. And I think that the expo and meeting the people at the expo and that community, from Dave Kluge to Joey Wright to all the guys over at Front Yard Fantasy. And I'm sure I'm missing a ton of different places, but it's just been so incredible to make those relationships and, see how we all help each other. And we're all basically just in each other's corners and rooting for each other.
Yeah, I can't say enough about the expo. Obviously, this is an event that takes place in August every year in Canton, Ohio, put on by Bob Lung, and it's truly an incredible event for the fantasy football community, analysts, experts, and obviously enthusiasts, people that just love the game. It gets bigger and better every single year. The attendees are just outstanding, but it's just so cool how it's just like family. Twitter's come alive, or X has come alive over the last few years when we go meet people in person finally, and I can't say enough about it. It's a special event, so definitely make sure you go if you got a chance or if you have some interest. So let's dive into some rapid fire questions. I'm gonna obviously try to get to know you a little bit better. I'm gonna fly through some questions. Just give me what first comes to mind.
Oof.
What do you enjoy most about what you're doing in the industry right now?
I think it's the creative side of it. I think it's always trying to come up with new ideas of like different content that we can do instead of trying to stay the same and get stale and do the same thing week after week. We're always trying to think of, every Tuesday we have a new thing that we're going to rank and a new different type of power ranking. And that creative side of me just keeps going.
I love it. What when it comes to creating content, what's been your biggest challenge thus far?
Oh man, that's a really good question. I would say the biggest challenge thus far has been kind of getting out of my own way and being comfortable being myself, whether it's on camera, on a microphone, or as I network and meet new people. You always kind of get a little worried. Everyone's looking at you. Everyone's listening to you. What if they don't like you? Well, that's kind of it, man. Like that's what making content is, and the people who remain your audience and remain your friends, it's because they like you. So I think that you get a little bit of that apprehension, and we all kind of get in our own way a little bit.
I like it. Makes sense for sure. I think that applies to everybody. Name a person in the fantasy industry that you would love to watch a game with, just to get their insight and perspective on the game.
So someone that I haven't been able to watch a game with, but we've traded notes back and forth and gotten to know each other a little bit more is Dave Richard over at CBS Fantasy Football Today. That's definitely a guy I just love to sit there and watch the game with him. Heath Cummings too. Like both of these guys have been guys that I've traded notes with back and forth on players and. And Dan Schneider too. I'm throwing all the CBS guys out there because they have been guys that I've been able to talk with plenty. And so to take that from just like Twitter DMs and little quick chats in person to sitting there hanging out watching a game, that would be awesome.
Yeah, sounds fun. What are your favorite hobbies and activities outside of fantasy sports?
So for a little bit there, my wife and I owned a kickboxing gym. And so that kind of became something that was just a lot of fun is, put your health and fitness first. And so not actually fighting, like I wasn't fighting people. It was more of like the cardio kickboxing. So hitting the bags and stuff like that. That became a big hobby of mine of being able to do that, 4 or 5 times a week and stay in shape. And other than that, man, I'm really big into movies. Not quite like Joey Wright. Not like Joey Wright. Joey Wright is next level into
sure.
movies, but I love movies and like comics and superhero stuff like that, Star Wars, all the sci-fi fantasy stuff. I'm big into those.
I love it. Do you have a favorite podcast outside of sports?
Oh, that's a good one. So you know what, I mentioned Star Wars. I'm a big fan of everything that they're doing with this new kind of like TV universe, the Mandoverse as it's called. And so I found a podcast that I really like that I have to watch every time there's a new episode of Star Wars, and it's called Children of the Watch. And it's these guys that break down every single episode, and they do like deep dive. These are guys that have read all the books and everything. And I'm not going to go and read all the books and stuff like that, but I love hearing their expertise, their side of it. It's kind of like it's kind of like hearing a fantasy football expert that knows way more than I do. And it's the same thing, but you know, you get to get yourself lost into this whole magical world of Star Wars. So big shout out to them over at Children of the Watch.
I like it. What's the last TV show that you binged?
Oh man. Okay. So last TV show that I binged, it's been a couple. I'll throw out a few out there. I finished binging Seinfeld recently. That was great. That hits so different in your 30s. So different from when I first tried to watch it. I didn't really enjoy it as much. Seeing
Yeah.
it now, total game changer for me. And the other one that I was a little bit late on was Silicon Valley. That was a fun show to watch. Dude, I when I start a show, I have to binge it. Like I have to go all the way through. Doing the weekly thing is fun and all. Like I did that for Ahsoka and some of the Star Wars shows, but binging, it just gets me right in the heart.
It's efficient. It's efficient too, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
matters. That matters when you don't have a lot of time. Do you have an all-time favorite show?
Ooh, okay. So that's gonna be tough. That's going to be a tie, I think, between The Office and that 70s show. That 70s show, even though I was not born in the 70s, did not grow up in the 70s, it's such a cool like coming of age tale for these kids living in a different time. And I watched that a lot as a teenager growing up. And so it was kind of cool to see like the things that I was dealing with in, you know, in the 90s and 2000s were somewhat pertinent back then in the 70s. And so just to see how like different ages dealt and generations dealt with things was kind of cool. And it always felt like I was hanging out with my friends.
That's good. That's good. Now, do you have an all-time favorite movie?
Okay, so it's a little chalky here, but I'm gonna say all-time favorite movie. mm, it's gonna be one of the Star Wars films, or if I'm gonna stay away from that because that's just too much, I will say Back to the Future is one of my all-time favorite films. It's just so much fun. It is so quotable. Uh, does everything from the movie hold up? No, but I think that's part of its charm. It doesn't have to, man. Like it's so great.
Yeah, you can't beat that answer. That's a good one. Now, what do you enjoy most about living in Florida?
It's winter technically right now, and I'm waking up and it's at coldest 65 degrees. And then throughout the day, it'll be in the 80s. So it's kind of the double-edged sword. As much as I'd love to have a nice cold winter and maybe have some snow, I kind of love that I don't have to deal with snow for my car and my house and all that stuff. But man, I'll say the one thing I don't like about Florida is how hot it is during the summer and all the bugs and stuff like that. Like we basically just live in a swamp out here. It's like we're not too far from the Florida Everglades, which is just like all marshland and gators and bugs and stuff like that. So I'll say that's the one thing I don't like. But man, being able to have outdoor weather all year round, it's phenomenal.
I like it. Now, do you have a favorite restaurant on the planet?
Favorite restaurant on the planet. Okay, so I'll give a little nod to a place out here in Fort Lauderdale that my wife and I go to. It's kind of like one of our date night spots. It's called Casa Sensei, and it is a Latin Asian fusion, and it combines, you know, two of our favorite foods, and it's really cool. It's like right on the water, on the intercoastal, and people can take a boat up to it, or you can like
Ooh.
park and, you know, and just walk over to the restaurant. But it's really cool, and it's on a strip in Fort Lauderdale called Las Olas. And that's just like a little spot where you can go bar hopping, you can go check out a bunch of different restaurants, and everyone kind of goes and hangs out there on the weekend. So that's a good spot. Also, I'm a sucker for any type of Indian restaurants. I just absolutely fall in love with them. It's so good. My trip to India that I did, the food was just phenomenal, man. Like I can't get enough of it.
That's so funny because it was just like 3 weeks ago. I saw like somebody did a video on, it was like TikTok or Instagram Reels on butter chicken and garlic naan, and I'm like, that video, I gotta go get that. So
Dude.
so we had 3 weekends in a row, 3 Sundays in a row, including one Saturday as well, where I'll go get Indian food for my family, for my wife and daughter. It's been like this tradition for 3 weeks in a row. And the guys, I know the guys now there, and that butter chicken is incredible. Like,
Dude,
we were like,
it's
this is
so good.
what? So good, so good. Now, do you have a favorite beverage?
Oh man. Okay. For a while there, it was coffee. I could not live without my coffee. I have tried to cut back now. I'm down to just 1 cup a day. Um, for a little while, I was a whiskey guy as well. Also, as I get older, trying to cut back on that too. The combination of like drinking, bourbon and coffee every single day is not great for your health. So, it's gonna be the most boring answer ever. But I'm a big water guy, a team
There you
water
go.
over here, H2O.
Hey, that's a good answer. It's important answer. You got to
Yeah.
drink your water. Do you have a favorite band or musician?
Ooh. Okay. So, I'm not cool, man. Like, I'm not cool. Um, I'll say like when I was growing up, I was really into Fallout Boy, and I was big into the whole emo alt rock movement of like it's not a phase, mom. That was totally me growing up as a teenager. And then now as I've gotten older, I've really just, I've come to really enjoy some of those like uh if I could put it into kind of a genre, it's like everything that you would hear in Guardians of the Galaxy, like that
Yeah,
kind of
that's good.
mixtape. That's
Yeah,
that's where my music is. I'm really digging a lot of like the older 50s, 60s, 70s music. It's just so much fun. It's simpler, and I don't know, man. Like the music just feels more pure from that era. It was a little less about being so commercialized and more about just making good music.
that's good. Now, speaking of Guardians of the Galaxy, have you been on that ride at Epcot?
No, I haven't, and I was at Disney recently, and I didn't get to go to Epcot. I
Ah,
have not been. I've heard that it's one of the best rides, around, and I also have not been on the Star Wars ride, Rise of
oh, you
the
got to
New
do
Order or
that.
Empire or whatever. Oh, dude, I'm so upset because every time I go, I can't get in. Like the
Yeah.
line queue, I guess, is done. So yeah, like I have a few things on my checklist on my bucket list there, in Disney, because I only live about 3 hours away, so it's not a far drive for me. So it's become one of those things that's pretty easy for the wife and I if we want to do a weekend trip. We head up to Orlando and hit up Islands of Adventure and go to the Harry Potter world or
Yeah, yeah.
any of the Disney parks, man. But yeah, that's definitely on the bucket list.
Yeah, we just went down there over Labor Day weekend. So, but yeah, Rise of the Resistance. I mean, that experience is like if you don't know anything about it and you go into it, it's like that's as good as it gets when it
I'm
comes
trying to
to
avoid all the spoilers
yeah,
because everyone
avoid
says
it.
the same thing. Like it's just
Oh,
it's incredible, and so like, I don't want to know anything
oh.
about it. I just want to experience it.
I say cancel all your plans. Go up there this weekend, right? I mean, you might as well. Now, do
Sorry,
you
Joe.
speaking of vacations and whatnot, do you have a favorite place to vacation?
Oh, that's fun. Okay. So you know what? I have a friend who lives out in Denver, Colorado, and that's definitely become one of my favorite spots to go to. I love the city. I've been able to really enjoy a lot of the outdoor stuff there, like going hiking and not sweating. What? I didn't even know that was a thing that you could go outside and not be sweat. I go to get my mail and I come back drenched out here in Florida. Like that sucks. So going to a place where, it could be a little cooler, the air's a little drier. I've definitely loved doing that, like going out into the mountains, playing golf. I had a stretch there where I was a big golf guy. I haven't done it in a little bit, but finding some of those beautiful golf courses, just phenomenal. Um, and then the other one that I will say that I went to, it's only been once, but it's magical. And I think everyone kind of says the same thing is going to Hawaii. It was just absolutely beautiful. No matter where you were, just beautiful views, beautiful culture. Food was fantastic. So yeah, those would be some of my spots out there on the West Coast, a little bit closer to you.
I like it. No, that's good. I can see where a Florida guy would think that just the contrast of like Colorado would be pretty special. I get that. Hawaii, been there a million times. Wonderful, but out here it's like we dream of Florida. We dream of the Caribbean too, right? So it's
Oh,
funny how someone in
I
Florida could talk about Hawaii when you got so many things below you.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like, living where I'm at, it's very tropical. So when people list all the tropical destinations, I'm like, okay, that's kind of more of the same.
Yeah.
I will say this, the one I forgot about, and I can't believe I messed this up, was we did Oktoberfest in Germany, in Munich, Germany,
Oh,
the year before COVID, and we bought the lederhosen that I still have, and going around from tent to tent, drinking all the awesome beers that were there for the festival. It was just that was a once in a lifetime bucket list experience that if you've never done it before, I would highly recommend. It was life changing. The city's actually pretty easy to get around into. People are a lot nicer than we think over here in the U.S. So yeah, that was probably the coolest trip. Maybe not from like a viewing standpoint, like Hawaii or anything like that, but man, going out there was just so awesome.
I like it. Now, if you were stuck on a deserted island with 5 people, who would you bring?
5 people. I don't even know that I like 5 people. Oh my gosh, now I got to be stuck with them. Okay, well, if I don't say my wife, I'm in big trouble. Um, my mom is still my number one fan, so I know she's watching this for sure. So definitely got to say mom. Um, dad as well. Okay, we hit the family, we hit the wife. We're good so far. Am I guess I got to bring like two of my best buddies after that. So yeah, I'm not gonna say the names out loud because I'm not gonna try to hurt anyone else's
There you
feelings. But
go.
then yeah, two of my best buddies would come with me
There
after
you
my
go.
wife, mom, and dad.
There you go. I mean, maybe someone who's resourceful. I mean,
Yeah,
it'd
yeah. Well,
probably
I
be
feel like
good.
one of them has to be Vig because he's really smart. But then that's kind of taking him away from his wife. But yeah, I guess he would help us survive.
There you go. I know. What is one thing that you're just super grateful for at this time?
Oh man, I gotta say, I jokingly said, I gotta bring my wife to that deserted island, but I am just so incredibly grateful for her. Like it's just I would not be doing this if it wasn't for her believing that I could and being okay with it. Being a business owner and going through COVID, it was really tough. Like there was times where we weren't earning money and living off of savings and stuff like that. And even through tough financial times, my wife was like, "No, keep chasing this dream. You're good at it. Go have fun. Go, turn this dream into a reality." And I know we all have a million things to be thankful for, but I think that a lot of that just starts with being thankful for the person you have at home and the person that's closest to you and the person that is propping you up and supporting your dreams.
That
And
is
I
beautiful.
just I don't think enough of us really appreciate the people that support our dreams, and we look inward a lot. And so I love this question because I get to brag on my wife a little bit. She's an incredible person, and she's supported me every single step of the way.
Absolutely a perfect answer. Now, obviously, when it comes to the game of football, it's 2023. We are in the middle of the season. Crazy season, in my opinion, thus far. What surprised you the most? What players have surprised you the most, either positively or negatively this year?
Oh man, I think it's just been how good these rookies have been. I think every year we get super excited about the rookies, and I always kind of joke that we get dynasty brain because we get excited about these rookies, and you get to redraft and you start overdrafting some of these rookies, and it's like, no, this year they've been really good. Even at tight end with Don Kincaid and at quarterback with C.J. Stroud, and then there's so many of these good running backs, Devon Achan, and then now we just saw Keaton Mitchell this last week, and the wide receivers just continue to produce, and it's not like years past where you maybe had like two wide receivers that were good. You're looking at like 6 or 7 of these guys that have been productive. It's just wild how players are being asked to do more at a younger age in the NFL, and they're still doing it well. The way that quarterbacks are assimilating, and it's just so impressive to me from a football and fantasy football perspective. Man, the way that these rookies have played is just phenomenal.
Yeah, wide receivers, the way they're integrating in the league is so different than the way it used to be. And obviously, this tight end class is kind of changing how people
Yeah,
view the tight end position. So when it comes to like a quarterback that you're looking to have a strong finish the rest of the season, is there one or two guys that come to mind?
I do think we need to pump the brakes a little bit on CJ Stroud. And I know I just finished saying that, rookie quarterbacks have been so good. Um, I do think I want to still be on the lookout for Kyler Murray. I'm really intrigued to see what he does when he comes back. I'm sorry to say that. I know you're a Seahawks fan, man.
It's fine.
But
I don't
I'm
really think the Cardinals is a rival, so it's fine.
I'm really in, not necessarily as like a guy like, oh, you have to roster him, but I'm just very intrigued to see what he's going to do the rest of the season here. If I'm looking at a guy that I think that maybe you can buy low on, or maybe he might get a little bit better. It's not necessarily a buy low, but it's Lamar Jackson. I think with so many people being disappointed with his fantasy output, and I think we're just scratching the surface of what that offense can do. I think it can only get better from here. We haven't really even seen the wide receivers produce all that much. So yeah, I think it can only get better.
Yeah, that's a good one. How about a couple running backs?
Couple running backs. We were just talking about this on the episode I was recording for the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. And I think that we wrote off a lot of these running backs for dead. Some of these older guys that were like, oh, they're kind of done. I'm very much comfortable with buying high on Jonathan Taylor because I think he's going to continue to be really good. He saw season highs in snap share, rush share, target share, everything this past week, and it is 100% his backfield. And I think when you look at him compared to some of these other guys like a Brees Hall, Josh Jacobs, DeAndre Swift, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, a bunch of guys that are like close to that tier, I think Jonathan Taylor might have one of the best roles in what might be one of the best offenses out of that bunch. Maybe not, DeAndre Swift from the Eagles, but yeah, I think that Jonathan Taylor has a real legitimate shot to jump into the top 3 or top 2 here rest of season.
How about a wide receiver that you're excited about finishing strong this year?
Wide receiver. I keep wanting to say Chris Olave, man, because everything just looks so good from a target perspective. And I keep saying all the peripheral data looks great as tears roll down my face. Like I'm hoping for that to happen. So I do think that we will get a little bit better of an end of the season here with Chris Olave. If I had to pick someone, I'd say I think that we've all forgotten a little bit about Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think it's gotten a little bit almost like we're just like, oh, we expect him to be good. And then the Lions were on bye. And I think that a lot of people were maybe expecting Jameson Williams to be better. I was one of those I'm people. I was expecting that too.
Yeah.
And, Amon-Ra's still out there commanding heavy targets. So that's another guy that I think if you could get him onto your roster in any way, like I do think that he's got top 4 upside rest of the season here.
Good advice for sure. Exceptional player for sure. How about a tight end?
Tight end. Okay, so I'm going to keep banging the drum for my guy, Jake Ferguson, that I have been talking about since before the season started. He was one of those guys that I was saying was a sleeper. And I remember like the show, people that were on were just kind of, we'll see. Okay. And it's just one of these things, man. Dak Prescott loves targeting the tight end. And that offense, it may not be running the way we want it to through Tony Pollard, but Jake Ferguson is essentially the second target on that team. And there's actually still a decent amount of leagues where he's still in the waiver wire. And with how bad tight end has been, I'm fine taking a shot on a guy like Jake Ferguson, who I think can probably be a top 10 tight end throughout the rest of the season here. And that's really what I want. It's just a guy that can get some target volume at tight end and potentially a touchdown in an offense where Dak Prescott keeps looking for him in the red zone. Yeah, I'll take that all day.
Great advice, great analysis. Now you have done a great job with establishing your presence within this industry and the fantasy community. Can you name a few people that have been a massive impact on you during your rise within the industry?
Yeah, so a couple of the people that I first reached out to, aside from I always like to give him the first shout out here is Dr. Vignesh Doraiswamy, who was my co-host doing the Pretend GM. He was always kind of a sounding board for me and a guy that always reminded me like, hey, you can do this, keep your confidence, you got this. And he was always there for me. So I always got to shout out him first. But a couple of the first guys that I ever spoke to in this industry were JJ Zacharyson and Pat Fitzmaurice, and just absolutely two of the nicest guys that were able to, give me feedback, teach me their lessons, and have become very good friends in this industry. And it's not so much something where I feel so much as I'm looking up to them anymore, despite how, phenomenal they are and how long they've been in the industry. It feels really nice to feel like a peer, and be amongst them. And so those are two guys that were very instrumental with kind of bringing me up and helping me out. And then, I'd be totally remiss if I don't mention all the people over at Football Guys, Dave Kluge, Joey Wright, Joe Bryant, and now, some of the newer people on our team. It's just, I think we all do a good job of lifting each other up, whether you're an established industry veteran or you've been doing it for just a couple of months, man. It feels like we all just do a good job of really propping up each other and treating it like a family.
Yeah, incredible people over there. That is for sure. Now, once upon a time, you were an aspiring fantasy sports analyst looking to get involved in the industry. What advice do you have for people that are wanting to follow that same path?
I would say, and this isn't normally what you hear. Normally, most people say just get out there and start doing it. And I already kind of said that, but I will say this. I think that more of us need to get that tough love and be able to accept, some of that feedback and the critique. And I say be open to that kind of stuff and hold yourself to a high standard. Every time that you write a piece of content or film yourself or record something, make sure this is something that you would want everyone to hear or see or read, something that you could put in front of anyone at a big network or in front of your family or your friends, and you can be proud of it. And if you feel like you're proud of the content that you're putting out there, then keep doing it. But I would just say, don't go through these things haphazardly. If you're going to do this and you're looking to make this into a career, uphold a really high standard every time you're doing something.
Great advice. And I think I would add, just obviously go to the expo and network and
yes.
meet people. The opportunities that present there are incredible. So great advice for sure. Alfredo, is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to share before we close things out here?
Okay. Man, I just, everyone, if you're watching this and you have not subscribed over to the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show, head on over and find that. You can find it on any of the major podcast platforms that you listen to shows, on Apple or Spotify. You can always check us out on YouTube. And, on top of that, we just have so many other great shows and content creators over at Football Guys. You can find that over on youtube.com/footballguys. It's been really a labor of love for me to kind of start what I've not necessarily a new generation of football guys, but, kind of elevating what we're doing and bringing up, some new people into this. So it's been a lot of fun. I'm really proud to show that work. And that's definitely something I'd love people to go and check out.
Awesome. So tell the viewers, the listeners, where they can find you.
Yes, you can always find me on Twitter at the Pretend GM, really any social media, Instagram, whatever. You can always find me there. And I'm not posting too much of the hot takey stuff. I try not to be the engagement farmer guy. I try to post clips of what we've got from our shows and post some rankings and pose some general questions to our audience and some polls and stuff like that. So if you ever do catch me being a little hot takey or engagement farming, let me know. Give me the old tap on the back there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this episode, Alfredo. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on, my friend, and I cannot wait to see where your career path takes you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it so much, Kev.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. Until next time, be sure to follow and subscribe to all of FFU's social media accounts for daily content.